If you've ever spent an afternoon trying to redesign your whole pedal board layout only to wind up right back where you started, go ahead and hit like and subscribe and all that. We're going to look at my pedal boards today. So I got a couple hours with the house to myself, so I figured I'd hit record and let it fly. Not sure what we'll call these summer random things, but let's maybe call them the summer spin-offs. So this will be summer spin-off episode 1. Why the hell not? A while ago, I spent like a good afternoon trying to. I can't remember if it was on a weekend or if it was on a weekday. There's just work was slow, but I spent the whole afternoon, like 3 or 4 hours, taking my whole gigging board. So I have 2 boards. We'll look at both, but redesigning my gigging board, the smaller board, to try and get just like a better layout. Not that the layout was bad to begin with, but I'm a tinkerer at heart. Uh, whether it was dirt bikes or mountain bikes or guitars or whatever, I always like to customize and mod and hot rod shit. I'm a hot rodder at heart. So I took it all apart, and I even there's a website you go to, Pedal Playground. So if you go to pedalplayground.com, they have most of the popular pedal boards and pretty much all the sought after, all the way up to current pedals in there. And then you can kind of build your exact layout and then start moving stuff around. Or you can do what I like to do sometimes when I'm bored and just come up with a scenario, a gig scenario or studio scenario, and build a board, like a fantasy board based on that criteria. So it's a great website to kind of visualize things without actually pulling cables and pulling shit apart. But I was bored a while back, and I figured, instead of going to the Pedal Playground site, I'll just do it the old-fashioned way, take it all apart, start organizing things a bit better. 3 hours later, I ended up with pretty much the same fucking thing that I had before. So I guess that's a good thing. But when you're a hot rodder tinkerer at heart, like sometimes you like to just change things up to make things feel new again. But I ended up pretty much in the same spot. So I was just thinking about that today, and I was back on Pedal Playground trying to figure out if there's a layout I missed or whatever. And that got me thinking, hey, I got a couple hours to spare here, and I'm kind of in between design projects. I got to get some more stuff done by end of day, but this will take hopefully not too long to do. So I figured I've gone over my boards and peppered here and there in a couple of the previous videos, but I figured I'd do a video on pedal boards. So we'll look at my first well, it's not my first, but like my first board built on I use Temple Audio boards just because I like the design, I like the concept, the modularity. Turns out it's a Canadian company too, so that doesn't hurt to support for me being Canadian as well. So they're cool boards, and I used to do like handmade, like planks of wood, and kind of make my own makeshift pedal board and use the Velcro stuff. And then when I saw those, I was like, okay, that's something that I think is a good option for me, because I like to constantly change things up, and then I wouldn't be having to pull off like the really strong, sticky Velcro stuff, or you move pedals a couple times, and then the fuzzy side of the Velcro it's really fluffy, and then it doesn't work. So the Temple Board audio stuff was a breath of fresh air for me, because it had a different attachment thing that you can easily unscrew, and it's modular. I like the modularity of things. Kind of gives it like a military feel where you can adapt your board based on the mission at hand, the gig at hand. So the first board I did was a Solo, a Solo 17. So not a huge board. I don't want to have a board with like 27 pedals on it. The way that one's designed was for the amps I was playing before I started jamming with some guys, and we formed a band. Before then, I was just playing here. So I'd have, you know, my Marshall and my Bogners. So I operated those different. Once I started gigging is where I started to see how lugging a head and a cab and a big board in a separate case and a guitar or two guitars or whatever. Sometimes the two trips to and from the car isn't always ideal or isn't always secure. So I went through the, you know, you've seen, if you've been watching for a while, I used to have a Fender Hot Rod DeVille 410 as a combo thing to just do one trip instead of two back and forth from the car. And that was pretty heavy, and it was starting to get old really quick. So I sold that and I got the deluxe reverb, much smaller and lighter. But I also use that amp differently than I use the other amps, and we'll go over that. So we'll start off with tabletop with the big solo board. I call it my studio board. We'll call it the studio board because generally it doesn't really leave the house. That one will only come with me to a gig if it's it depends on the conditions, right? Like if it's like a hole in the wall bar, I'm bringing this and I'm doing one trip. If it's a more secured location with parking close to an entryway and it's a bigger gig where we're playing an hour plus and there's space on the stage, then I'll bring a bigger amp. However, lately we've been trying to work on stage volume, and I'm pretty much the only Luddite on the band that just I can't do digital. So my amp got smaller and we stick a mic in front of it. So we'll look at the big board first, and then I've got a solo 18. So it's a duo 17 is the big one, and the solo 18 is my smaller gigging backpack board. It just shoves in a backpack. So get back to you here with that top side view of the studio board. So here's the studio board. And the way I have this set up is for my two Bogners and my Marshall. All three have an effects loop, and all three provide the main core source of gain. So what I'm doing with these is different than what I'm doing in on the other board that I use with the Fender Deluxe Reverb. So just to kind of go over the whole thing, the board is basically split into half right down here. This is all front facing right into the amp, and this is in the effects loop. So we have these Temple Audio modules. I think it's called the 4X mod. Yeah, 4X mod. So you've got 4 isolated input outputs, right? So on the other side of this, you get a bunch of cat hairs and human hairs. What the hell? Yeah, there's another set of jacks on the other underside of the board. Maybe I can show it. See right here, right? And so that's how I'm setting it up, so that I've got my in goes through this out to the front of the amp, and then on the other side I have another one where it's effects send goes in, goes through all this stuff, and then back out to the return. So it's split into two. So all the time and modulation effects are in the loop. So the way this all works, the first thing you plug into the side here, and then that goes to here. So the first thing you hit is the tuner. In this case, it's a D'Addario, I forget what model, but whatever. It's a D'Addario tuner. It works, it's good. It is beveled and a bit lower than these knobs and switches. So I put a little, whatever you call that, little knobby thingy, right? So it goes through here. I typically like to have the tuner be the first thing the guitar hits, because then you get a very direct, clean sound to tune with. Otherwise, I find sometimes this, like if you've got a drive on, it can kind of sort of affect the tuning accuracy. So you have to turn off the drive pedals and whatever. But in this case, we're running it the first thing. From there, it goes to the soul food, which I set more of like a clean boost and then a little bit of grit. And then I tailor the treble to suit the guitar and or the room. And this basically boosts the front end of the amp. So you get, you set the amp to have a nice crunch, and then you push this in, it pushes the preamp. You get a little bit more drive out of it. This one here, the Plumes, is more like the Tube Screamer. For people who don't like Tube Screamers, I believe it's got more volume on tap. I normally set it like this, sort of like, basically I'm doing the same thing with this as I do with this. The difference is this, you get a bit more push, a little bit more gain out of it, but tighter low end. And then I guess, yeah, like a slight mid hump. Whereas this one's got more low end that goes in. So sometimes, you like the song or the room or just the way you're feeling, one will take precedence over the other. I can put this on, boost the amp, and you get like a nice aggressive, edgy gain type sound. I can then turn this on and just get a little bit more. So these push the front end of the amp. So it goes from the tuner to the soul food to the Plumes and then to the ODR1. ODR1 I use on a clean channel. And why I do that is it's the best sounding drive I've ever heard for a clean channel when you just need like low to moderate gain. Not a whole lot of crunch, not a whole lot of dirt, just a little bit. I like to call it a little bit of hair. And the reason I find this sounds better than any other pedal I've tried for that application is that it doesn't sound like a pedal. It sounds like an amp drive, like a natural amp type of distortion that's mild, right? Like kind of like a cranked deluxe reverb when it starts to break up. It's kind of like that. So that's what I use that. But what I can do with this being after these two pedals, the Soul Food and the Plumes, is that I can use either of these to nudge this into more gain. So basically push the front end of the amp, but this becomes the amp, right? That's how I'm using the core gain pedal on my other pedal board. I have a Bogner Blue that you'll see later. And so it's kind of the same concept here, though I generally don't boost this because if I need more gain, I just switch to the gain channel and then use these if I want more. So that's how the front end stuff works, right? So two kind of dirty-ish clean boosts going through their circuit. So you get two different sounds, a little bit more low and low mids. This one's more high and high mids. This is kind of like the clean channel gain where you want a nice Fender-like breakup and you want it, but your drive channel set to crunch is just too much. So like the Bogner Shiva, for example, when I set the gain channel to like just a nice crunch, it's sometimes too much for the song. And when you're in a cover band, you're playing a lot of different genres and eras and stuff. So you kind of have to have pretty much anything close enough at your foot switchable disposal, basically. So in here, in here, in here, and in here, and then out of here goes out this side to the front of the amp. This guy here is a amp switcher for the Shiva, which also works for the Deluxe Reverb. But I use it for the Shiva and basically channel switch and the boost switch from the amp. I think I have a wiring diagram of this, and if I do, I'll put it up on the site and put a link in the video below. Very simple setup. two little LEDs and two switches and a box and an output jack. This is a stereo one, so you get a stereo cable, and then you get these two inputs. So that's that half of the board. Then you go through the effects send out of the amp into the left side here, which goes, the first thing it hits is the MXR analog chorus. So it hits that, and then let's see here. Then I think it goes to, yeah, then it goes to the dispatch master, then the Starlight, and then the Flint. So generally, like the Deluxe Reverb has a decent reverb. The Shiva has a decent reverb, but the difference is that the Shiva's reverb there's like too much decay. So even if you run the reverb knob on the back low, it's often still too much. So I like to be able to control the reverb and switch it on and off. And this was a perfect option. That came up for sale. Actually, I got this on a trade, amp for amp, and I gave him a couple extra bucks, and he threw this in. So I'm getting the spring type reverbs here, and there's a bonus tremolo here, so I didn't need a tremolo pedal on this. So I'm getting the reverb all from this, right? But then sometimes you don't want the springy reverb, you just want a subtle plate reverb, and the ability to throw in like an analog delay that's not over the top. Dispatch Master is a great pedal to have. And you can turn the reverb off, or you can turn the delay portion off and just run it as either or. But together it just works so well. So that's why I have that there, when this thing might be too much and this one being too springy. This is self-explanatory. You look this up on YouTube. There's a lot of videos showing what this thing can do. It can pretty much do it all. I generally use the tape echo off of this because it just sounds so good. And then, this is self-explanatory too, reverb, whatever. So that's how I was running for years, my boards, the previous ones to this. And then once I switched to Temple Audio here, is I've always had the drive and the boosts and the tuner all in the front, and then this stuff in the loop. But then I started jamming with the band and started gigging, and I quickly realized that there's certain things that I like things a certain way, but I've had to adjust just to make it easier on myself, right? So when you set up on stage for this, right? So I'll just take, like, for example, the last gig I did with the Shiva, right? So you got a head and a cab, a cable to connect the head to the cab. Then you got your guitar cable to the input, the cable from the output to the amp, and then two more cables for the effects send return, and then your power and all that jazz. And, it's not a big deal, but when you can just plug, turn on the amp, you're done. It simplifies things. It makes things a lot nicer. And the sound difference between this setup and the other setup I'll show you is not that huge. So that's what I'm running here. Oh yeah, as far as the power on the other side, oh shit, of course the print is on the other side, but it's a Joyo. It's just a cheap output, a power bar. And it's just kind of a little spaghetti-ish here. But whatever, it works. Is the Joyo, I forget, the JP5, I think it is. And it's got a battery in it, so you charge it up, and then you could usually get about a board this full. You probably get about an hour to 2 hours on the battery before it starts to warn you that it's going to shut off. But you could leave it plugged in at all times, which is what I sort of do. I've got a little mini box here that I did. Because one thing that I find annoying is all these Temple Audio modules, unless you get them on sale like I did with these two guys, they're otherwise quite expensive. So I made my own power box, and that's basically two 9-volt jacks wired together, and then I just bent some steel to make a little box, and then covered the ends with some aluminum tape just to kind of isolate it all. And it works fine. I mean, if you've got the money to spend on a pro power supply unit, by all means go ahead. But if you're not running a shit ton of pedals, and depending on some people's opinions, this board's not overly pedally. This here works fine. I believe these are isolated power outs, power ins, or whatever you want to call it. But it's not noisy for me, and it's working fine. And I've been using this for at least, I think 3 years now, and it still works fine. So that's how I power the thing. And what I did here is a 9-volt jack. I drilled through the plate, the Temple Audio plate here. So when you put modules, you take the plate out and you screw in the module instead. So I essentially made my own module using their existing plate by drilling a hole and mounting this to it. So there are ways you can kind of MacGyver shit to make it work without spending like, you know, the 50, 60 bucks for a little output, like a little power jack or whatever. Make your own, right? It's very easy. There's diagrams online for that. So that's this board. Now we're going to switch over to the smaller gigging board, and I'll go over why I went from this to that for gigging. All right, so this is my gigging board, right? The one where I'm basically using this with the deluxe reverb. So how I'm running this differently than the other one is everything goes into each pedal and then out to the front of the amp. So this reverb, this delay reverb, both going in the front. This is all going in the front of the amp. All of this is going in the front of the amp. It has no effects loop. So there's that too, right? But what I did with this board is I did the same thing with the power jack, right? Made a box like I did with the other one. And then here what I did instead is I reused the plate and I drilled some holes and I put some jacks. But the secret here is I got some the small, I forget what number this is, but like a mini pedal box body thing, right? And then I drilled 2 holes on one side, 2 holes on the other, and wired them so that you have the output jacks are not face to face. They're on the side here because otherwise they would touch and you can't plug 2 cables into each other like this. So this one and this one are wired together, and then these 2 are wired together. And I did the same thing on the other side. So essentially that 4X mod unit that I had in the bigger board, I just basically made my own. I'm going to dig up the wiring diagram for this, and I'm going to put that on the site too. And I'll put the links in the description so that if you're tech savvy and you can solder and you want to make your own like this, then hey, then you'll be able to. Or if you don't want that and you want me to build you one, then we can talk. So since we're under here, let's talk about the power. So there's only like 8 pedals to power on here. It's nothing too crazy. And where a 1-spot daisy chain 9-volt thing would be perfectly fine with this, I figured these are cheap. This was on Amazon, and they advertised it as isolated power outputs. It's not isolated at all. It's essentially a box, and you're daisy chaining the whole thing through this. It's got the power supply format as opposed to just daisy chained wires. So it kind of helps you clean everything up and make things tidy. There's that power box again, same way I did the other one. So that's under the board. So the way I run this board to get my sounds out of a Fender Deluxe Reverb, it all starts with this. So what I think I'm going to do is I got another pedal to replace this guy coming soon. This one sounds fine, it does the trick, but there's a noise that goes through the whole thing, isolating it back to this pedal, whether the pedal's on or off. And so I'm going to eliminate that and put something else in its place that hopefully doesn't have that noise. So by doing that, I used to have this up top here and these two guys down here, and I had the tuner as the first thing that hits it. I wanted to test this, and I do find that if I have drives on and then I turn on the tuner, it has a harder time to tune than having a clear signal. So this is going to go back to the top, and then these two are going to drop and flip. But for now, the input, it hits this thing. And I don't use this on its own. This is kind of like an always on pedal. We've got like a mild gain on the one side, and then I can boost it to get more gain. So essentially I'm getting my Bogner tone from my other amps into a deluxe reverb by using this. So this is the core thing of the sound. If I need an absolute clean, then I turn this off. But in general, I'll leave this on, just roll my volume back a little bit, and it cleans up just like an amp. So this being very much like an amp and very much like an amplifier's preamp section, it's scary how close I can get pretty much any clean pedal platform amp to sound like my Bogner Ecstasy, the 3534, the actual amp. It's amazing how this can make it sound like that amp, like close enough to the point where it even almost feels the same. The only difference is it ends up being a little darker sounding. At stage volume, that's not an issue. So I run this, it goes into this. And then after this, it goes into the tuner, and then the chorus, the tremolo, the equalizer, and then it goes to the dispatch master, and then the Heavenly by UAFX, and then out to the front of the amp. So that's how it's going. I'm going to reroute this so that this is the first thing you hit, and then this, and then this. So this has to come before this, because essentially with this, I'm doing the same thing as I was doing with the Soul Food and the Plumes in front of the Bogner or the Marshall. This is now the Bogner or Marshall, right? I'm pushing the front end of this. This is the amp that I'm pushing. And then the the deluxe reverb basically amplifies that and puts it out the speaker. I do find you gotta run the bass low on this, and depending on the amp, you gotta boost the treble a little bit and stuff to kind of tweak it to the way it sounds through the amp. So it's a very different EQ setup here and on the amp as it was with the Hot Rod DeVille. That was a weird amp to EQ, and the Deluxe Reverb's a lot more of a flat, balanced platform to use this on. So use this to boost this. So I get about 4 gain sounds, right? This on, and then this on with the boost, this on with the boost, and this. So that's like the highest gain setting. Or I can do this on with this as the boost, which gives me a more mid-forward, tighter low-end kind of sound. Sometimes you need a slightly higher gain tone for soloing, but you don't want too much low-end. This with this works great. Otherwise, I'll do these two because it sounds more like just a cranked amp. So goes through that, then the super chorus and the tremolo for now. Tremolo being one that I'll probably keep on, and the one that I'll switch in and out is probably this. Try different things, but for now it's a super chorus because it's used on a lot of tunes that we cover, as does the tremolo. And then it goes into the EQ, and the way I use the EQ is I just bump the 800 and the 1.6K just a bit. And all that does, it boosts the mids just a little bit to get my volume just a hair louder, so I can kind of cut a little bit above the mix so that when I'm soloing, it comes through as opposed to getting buried in the mix. That's pretty much the only reason I use this right now. But you can use this in so many ways. Like you could use this as a boost to push like a Marshall or a hot rodded Marshall amp, right? You can crank this. You can tailor your EQ to whatever. You can make your amp sound like a tiny box, like a tiny little pig nose type combo. And then Dispatch Master, you get, you know, nothing too crazy. I can do some U2 type delay stuff with it, but not the crazy stuff he does. Just the more mild delay work. This will do it, but I'll have to like crank the mix and then play with these to get the right tone. Generally, I keep the settings about like this, right? Then you get a nice balance of reverb and echo. And then this is just this is a new edition. The deluxe reverb has a good reverb on it. It's very springy. It's got that classic Fender reverb. But I do like to have more control over the reverb as far as switching it on and off, which I can do with a separate pedal, like a switch pedal for the deluxe reverb. But I like having more control of turning it on or off, or changing the decay, the mix. This one has pre-delay, which is pretty cool. EQ. Some rooms are darker than others. Some sound brighter than others, and your reverbs sometimes don't always work. So you can tune that into the room. And then mod, I'm guessing it's some kind of, I don't know, vibrato or chorus or flange type thing. It's just subtle, but you can tune that in. Just a pretty cool board. It's very simple. A lot of it is inspired by some Nashville guys that have gone through their boards. They got boards as big as this table with everything under the sun. That's their studio board. And then they got their smaller like gig boards that are smaller like this. Then the fly boards where it's just like 3 or 4 pedals, right? So it's kind of inspired by that. And especially these two, right? These are kind of staples on Nashville boards. Some guys will even have more than one of these set to do different things. That's how useful and versatile and powerful the Boss G7 is. But yeah, this is how I'm running the whole thing, and I can't say enough good things about the Bogner Ecstasy. I mean, I'm a Bogner fan. I've been a Bogner fan since I was in high school, reading Guitar World magazine and stuff like that. And so when I got this, I was pleased to find out that I could pretty much make any little clean pedal platform combo sound like the Bogners I'm used to, or the Hot Rod and Marshall I'm used to. And you got a lot of settings here, right? You got the Variac off, on, just gives you a different feel on the pick, right? Plexi mode and blue mode. So blue mode, that's like your 101B ecstasy type of tone. You go to plexi and it's a little bit brighter and less gainy, a little less low end. Pre-EQ, so you can tailor your brightness going into it, how bright the tone is. And structure, you get your 101B, your 100 classic, and your 20th anniversary Bogner's type of slight voicing variances. So it's pretty cool. I mean, you can do everything with this. And if you need more than this gives you, you can very easily boost it like this is an amp with this would be a clone, right? The Silver Horse. But there's a lot you can do. Like I can go from clean to high enough gain to do some 90s and early 2000s grunge and metal stuff. You can do that with this out of a deluxe reverb, which is the real fun part of it. Is you can get that out of a deluxe reverb just by these 2 pedals alone, or even just this, right? You can boost the gain here. So these 2 knobs here, volume and gain for the boost mode. What I do find though is if you bump the gain up, because when you do the boost, you get more gain, but you also get more bass out of this. And if you have the boost gain up too high, it starts to get overwhelming for pretty much any amp. But that aside, you learn quickly how to work with it and where your limits are for the amp you push this through. But so far, man, for the Hot Rod DeVille, by all, it's not a great amp. It's a great clean amp for pedals, but it's not a great amp, and the EQ is fucking weird. And this was able to make that usable, and the recorded sound of it on video was actually really decent out of the DeVille. And I find it works better even with the deluxe reverb. I don't know how it'll work with the deluxe reverb Tone Master, the digital version, but I did test this setup through the Super Reverb Tone Master. And at first it sounded like shit, but in the end I was able to dial this stuff in and the amp in and find a sweet spot for it that sounded really good and it worked really well. And it would have been totally giggable, but I'd rather, spend that same amount of money on a real tube amp, because I'm not ready to go digital quite yet, aside from like digital effects, right? Pretty sure this is digital. The Starlight is digital. This is, and I think the rest here is analog. This is digital, of course, but so yeah, that's how I'm using. So basically, the bigger amps, I'm pushing the front end to get more of its gain out. Through the deluxe reverb, I'm using this as the gain, the core gain going into the amp, and I'm pushing this as if this is the amp in front of it. Everything else through the front of the amp, and I find that this setup doesn't really overwhelm the deluxe reverb at all. I mean, it's a pretty impressive little amp. So I see why it's a Nashville standard out there. But yeah, those are my boards. I don't know, was that useful? Did you kind of get inspired to do your board up, or to redesign your board, or start building one? Um, don't go out and buy all the pedals just so you can make a board. But I think most people watching this, if you're playing guitar, you probably have some pedals. Um, Definitely check out pedalplayground.com. That's a cool site. No affiliation. They're not paying me shit. I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm literally just doing this for fun. But check out that site and build some boards, and maybe you can rework your pedals in a way that you plug in, and you stumble across a new sound, and you get inspired by it, and you lose a couple hours playing, or you write a new song or whatever. But it's the real challenge is when you're trying to get as much out of a small board setup as possible, and get as much sound with the least amount possible. Because then, as much as you try to reorganize stuff, like, you're still stuck within the limitations of the board that you chose. But the Temple Audio stuff's pretty cool. I did hear that, like, the bigger ones, there's a lot of flex. Like the red one there, my studio board has a bit of flex, but it's not that bad. These Solo 18s, these ones here, they're very, very sturdy because they're so much smaller. But a lot of this stuff is stuff I've learned the last couple of years watching Nashville guys on YouTube, and seeing how when they gotta do a gig or fly somewhere, they're bringing not a whole lot of stuff. In most cases, less stuff than I got here, but they're also playing with a lot less gain than I have to or want to. They're like their gain is they're layering their gain like very small amounts, increments of small amounts, whereas I'm getting quite a bit out of the blue pedal. Like, with those two pedals, the Mosky Silver Horse and the Ecstasy, I'm getting as much gain as I ever need or want. That I'm using about the same amount of gain on the Bogners when I push them. So I don't know. Hopefully that was cool for you. Just hanging out, shooting the shit. So summer spinoffs, we'll call it that. Summer spinoff. I don't know if you have any other ideas on pedalboard stuff. Load your comments down there, or send me your comment down below, like your pedal chain order thing. Like, are you running them all through the front of the amp too, or are you running them split front end and effects loop? One thing I'm kind of curious about is the UA effects have their amp modeling pedals with cab sim. And I was kind of looking at those, wondering, like, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to have one of those as a backup in case the tube amp shits the bed. Then I could just throw a line to the front of house with cab sim and use that as the amp. And I'm not sure, like, where would you put that, right? Would you put it at last in the line and have all your other effects going through it? I don't know. That's something else to kind of, I don't know, maybe if you know that answer, comment that below too. On that note, I got to do some more design work and I got to edit this video and post it. So until then, I'll see you on the next summer spinoff. Oh, I hope you're having a good summer. Do some stuff, but don't get heat stroke.